welcome everyone to our last session, which is a roundtable entitled Researchers Without Borders, Internationalization and Research Trajectories, 1991-2021. And before we're going to start this session, I'd like to give the floor to Florence, Vychytil-Baudoux. So Florence, if you want to hop in.
I'm a PhD candidate at EHESS and an associate PhD student at CEFRES, but I'm also a member of the provisional board of the CEFRES Alumni Association that is behind today's last panel. And before we start, I would like to take a couple of minutes to just give you some background information regarding why and how this session was set up and how it articulates to CEFRES 30th anniversary. So as you may imagine, 30 years, that's a lot of cohorts. That's over 200 researchers, PhD students, and interns all together. And based on those reasonably high figures for a research center the size of CEFRES, the idea of an association of alumni had been pending for quite some time. Eventually, a provisional board was set up last summer, and we were hoping to host our first General Assembly yesterday, but that would not have sit very well with the current sanitary situation. So we decided to postpone, and hopefully we will be able to reschedule it later this fall. Nevertheless, we are glad that we could still contribute to this conference and organize this panel, which builds up on our collective experience as CEFRES researchers or students. And our intention today is not to be self-congratulatory. Rather, it is to explore and reflect critically upon the transformations that European research and the research profession have been subject to over the last 3 decades. And echoing Professor Menger's lecture this morning on resources, performance, competition, and collaboration in scientific research, we'd like to address the internationalization of research, not just as a set of abstract processes, but as a lived experience, and so doing to emphasize issues of time, space, gender, and so on. So to put it in a nutshell, this is an attempt at providing some sort of embodied history of the changes that we have witnessed, experienced, and even contributed to firsthand. That said, in the name of all board members, I would like once again to thank all the participants in today's session. And without further ado, I'll now turn to our distinguished chair and speakers. So Clara, the floor is yours now.
Thank you, Florence. I couldn't have said it better myself. And thank you for this initiative. Actually, our topic started to be addressed by the last paper that we heard from Matthias Adde. So it was a perfect transition, I think, between the two sessions. So without making you wait too much, so this is how it's going to go. We have the pleasure of having with us 6 anciens de CEFRES, 6 former fellows of CEFRES from the 1990s to the 2010s, and of course with the 2000 in the middle. And each of them will talk for 6 to 7 minutes, and then on the basis of what they will have shared with us, we will have a common conversation to try and foster debate and discuss the positive aspects and the less positive aspects of this internationalization of research. 3 French speakers, 2 Czech and 1 Slovak speakers. I have to say it gives me great pleasure to see all of you. I know most of you, and I'm very pleased to introduce now the first of our 6 speakers, Pascal Marty, who is currently, as Jérôme said, the director of the Maison Française d'Oxford, who was a CNRS researcher at CEFRES in the late 2000s, but also after that, from 2011 to 2017, or 18 even, you were Deputy Scientific Director for the CNRS at the Institute of Human and Social Sciences. And then you coordinated the evaluation of French research laboratories in humanities and social sciences at the French High Council for Evaluation of Research and Higher Education. I'm mentioning these because it gives you a specific bird's view on such questions. By trade, you are a geographer, and your research dealt with the interactions between societies and the natural environments. And now we'll just leave you the floor for 7 minutes of presentation. Thank you.
Well, being there for the 30th anniversary of the CEFRES, it's something very important for me, because CEFRES was and is a center that has meant a lot to me, even though I have only been in CEFRES for 3 years, but those 3 years were very, very important to me. So it's also a pleasure to be able to participate, because I am very convinced of the importance of the UMIFRE structure. I do think it's a very original form of research center, very specific of the French system, but very useful for the internationalization of research. And as well, Clara told in his introduction, it's also very stimulating for me to be able to talk about internationalization of research, because I'm very convinced that it's something necessary, something useful, something stimulating, interesting for young researchers in particular. I don't particularly want to talk about my personal history. I can only say that 2 institutions have meant a lot to me, and perhaps to many other researchers, for when it's as far as internationalization is concerned. And these 2 institutions are, first, the European Commission and its framework programs, and the CNRS. So I want to say a few words about, to my view, how the programs from the European Commission can offer, and offered in the past and still offer in the present and in the future, fantastic tools for internationalization of research. Because, to be able to be a sort of an international researcher and having a rich international experience cannot be done only because you want. You also rely on tools, you also rely on structures that allow you to be able to go abroad and to collaborate with other institutions. And for that, I think that, in my experience at least, the collaborative programs of the European Commission, of the successive framework research programs, were a fantastic experience. It was an extraordinary opportunity for developing the research. But for that, you need first that, some of us accept to be involved in the difficult task of coordinating programs, of leading applications, of convincing people of the value, of the interest of submitting projects, or simply to accept to be in a collaborative program, a work package leader, and to take some responsibilities. And so I have always and sometimes heard that submitting applications to the European Commission was painful, time-consuming, sometimes bureaucratic process. Perhaps sometimes that's true, but I do really think that it's worth trying. And in my now duties of being a director of UMIFRE, like Jérôme and many others, I always try to convince as much as possible researchers, graduate students to think about European projects and to think about submitting projects. And it can be collaborative projects, it can be individual projects with the ERC scheme or the Marie Curie scheme, but all these tools are extraordinary and interesting and fruitful. Sometimes you need institutions to help you to submit your applications, and it's here I found the transition to talk about the second part of the institutions of interest for internationalization, to my view, meaning CNRS. So I'm personally and particularly grateful to CNRS and to the opportunities it can provide, and it provided for me for internationalization. When we look back at what has been done in the past, we can see that institutionally, there has been a lot of investment by CNRS to provide a tool for young researchers for international mobility, and just a few examples. First, the UMIFRE institution itself, it's, when you look at it, something very original. It's a joint effort by CNRS and Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And this association is per se very original. The UMIFRE provide a fantastic platform for young researchers to be able to spend time abroad, not only to spend time, but to find colleagues, institutions, programs to collaborate with. And it is the ideal place and the ideal institution to really start an international career. The second thing I want to talk about, I don't want to talk too much about UMIFRE because I know that everybody in the room or participating to the roundtable is convinced of the interest of being supportive to the effort of research doing the UMIFRE. I want also to flag some other tools now available and made available by CNRS. The first one, what we call the Contrat Doctoral International. It's a very original doctoral scheme. It not only provides the graduate student with financial support during 3 years, but it also includes the necessity or the opportunity of being part of an international center abroad during at least 12 months, perhaps more, during the PhD. And this is a fantastic tool for internationalization. So interesting that it inspired other institutions. For instance, Aix-Marseille Université started to develop the same schemes. For instance, with the École Française de Rome, with sort of a joint PhD scheme open to every student of the doctoral schools of the university. And this is a very interesting step. The last tool I want to talk about is the Soutien à la mobilité internationale. It's something that was launched by CNRS in 2015, I think, or perhaps 2016. It's a very flexible tool because sometimes we hear young researchers saying that they lack in their university the flexibility for going abroad. Being a member of a UMIFRE is a process that, it's sort of a long-term research in a UMIFRE, 2 years, 3 years. And sometimes researchers need shorter stays for several types of research. It can be setting projects, it can be finishing a publication, it can be starting a new collaboration and a new project. And sometimes you need just 3 months, perhaps 4 months to be able to be abroad in any kind of international institution you want to collaborate with. And the Soutien à la mobilité internationale offers this possibility. So I will stop here. We'll be able to comment later on that. But my main message is that, beyond individual histories, beyond individual careers, you find institutional tools, and we have to support these schemes, because without them, internationalization of research is really difficult, and we need this help. And I do think that with that, we can provide you young students and young researchers with many opportunities. Thank you very much.
Jana Vargovcikova, she's a political scientist and now a maîtresse de conférence, that means like assistant professor at INALCO in Paris. And Jana was a CEFRES doctoral fellow twice in the 2010s, and that's when she was doing her PhD in co-tutelle between Charles University on the one hand and Université Paris-Nanterre. And she mainly works on issues pertaining to political transformations in the Czech Republic, Poland, and Slovakia. So Jana is a case in point of internationalization, since she now lives and teaches and works in Paris. So Jana, the floor is yours.
CEFRES remains for me one of the places where I feel at home, even though I only spent 2 years compared to many of today's guests and panelists. So the first year, and I had the chance to kind of see CEFRES as well in 2010 and 2011, and then later in 2015-16. First, so just to specify the time and place of the very junior experience of internationalization that I have had. So I'm a Slovak. I moved to Prague for my university studies in 2004, so the year of the accession of Central European countries to the EU. Then I did my PhD in the 2010s at Charles University, and it is at CEFRES that I kind of started to want to establish a co-tutelle regime PhD, and the CEFRES enabled that. So the CEFRES was the ground where I found the French supervisor, where I met Georges Mink, who very kindly accepted to be my supervisor. And then I started the co-tutelle and kept the link with the CEFRES until today in different forms. So before and during the PhD, I was at CEFRES and went to France, spent a couple of years there, went to Poland, worked at the College of Europe there, which was great because I learned a language and could do a field work in the language during that year. And after finishing the PhD, so there we are at the end of the 2010s, started the period of the postdocs, where the kind of internationalization experience also became kind of increasingly, and I think that's probably not only my experience, an external expectation, not only a choice, where I went to Belgium for 1.5 years, and then to France, to Nancy, so to work in teams that I had never, the members of these teams I had never met before and known before. I knew some of their work, but during the postdoc period really discovered a wholly different ways of working, especially in Belgium, which is a very interesting place, I find, to analyze as when it comes to the strategies of positioning in this globalized world of social sciences, because at least from my perspective, it seemed to me that the Belgian, even the French-speaking Belgian universities are somewhere between the French academia and the Anglo-American model of research in social sciences. And so when I think of it, just to highlight 2 or 3 things, when I think of it, clearly my path is kind of, in fact, literally made of experiences of internationalization. It's not just influenced or enriched by internationalization here and there. I mean, internationalization understood as a co-creation of objects, methods, and career paths across and in between different academic fields. And the 2-3 points that when I try to come up with something that kind of my very junior path could be telling about. First, I think my very representation of what research is about came from an experience of internationalization. So the very representation I had about what one could do, how one could do it and who could do it, also very importantly. And it so happened that it was at the CEFRES where I saw scholars who were women direct a research institution. So Marie-Claude Morel, when I was first interviewed for a CEFRES scholarship, then Françoise Maillère during my first year, and of course, very importantly, Clara Royer during my second year at the CEFRES. Now, secondly, the kind of international experience had really, I think, a key effect on how I defined my research topics. During the PhD and after, getting familiar with the French political sociology, clearly defined what my dissertation became. And that would clearly not have happened had I not spent the time at CEFRES and met researchers that CEFRES was able to bring to Prague and to Central Europe. That's also linked to a very specific way of internationalization, that is the co-tutelle regime, that remains, in my eyes, a very interesting model to sustain and to encourage, even though it is a bumpy road, I must say, in many respects, because it's very individualized, administratively complicated, but it is an interesting pole, different from the kind of convergence into a global Anglo-American social science, because it enables exposure for a long period of time and really deep familiarization with two different academic environments. And thirdly and lastly, and very importantly, as someone coming from Central Europe, so being this category of CEFRES PhD scholar who came from Charles University to the CEFRES, I actually only fully realized how little I knew about Central Europe when I moved to the CEFRES and then later to France. And clearly I was brought to adopt a regional view at the CEFRES, then in Poland, when I realized I knew too little about a neighboring country. And then when I went to France to do research and teach on Central Europe. And the way I, as initially a Slovak and Czech coming to CEFRES and passing through CEFRES, the way I am viewing Central Europe and hopefully will in the coming years is completely different than what it would have been had I stayed either at Slovak level or a Czech level. So that's perhaps an interesting way, an interesting role that CEFRES has been playing. In other words, and really to end, internationalization played kind of a role for finding new ways for me for reflecting on my situatedness and on working with my situatedness in an interesting way and ask research questions that would be both relevant and interesting for others than the Czech and Slovak academia. Thank you very much.
Thank you for these first remarks that actually also insist on the transformative nature of the process of internationalization, because it did change you, as it probably changed all of us in ways that we did not necessarily envision when we started to go outside of the house. I'm going now to give the floor to our third speaker, and with him we're with the 1990s CEFRES. It's Gilles Lepesant, also a geographer, a senior researcher at the CNRS, and an associate fellow at the Asian Energy Studies Center, the Hong Kong Baptist University. Your research investigates the factors that shape the ramping up of renewable energies across Europe and assesses the sustainability of the value chain. You're currently posted in Berlin at the Saint-Marc block. So Gilles, thank you, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Clara, and congratulations to Jérôme and to all the organizers. I can imagine that it has been quite challenging to organize such an event. And it's moving to listen to people I got to know many years ago, Marie-Claude, Georges, Christian, among others. I can see, and I'm very glad of that CEFRES has remained a very lively and a very attractive place. When I was there, I had the pleasure to work together with Françoise Mayer, Hanna Netukova, Claire Madel, Jean-Pierre Ostertag, Libouche-Stavikova. And thanks to this wonderful team, it has been very easy for me to be in touch with different Czech colleagues, especially at the Institute of Geography, at the Institute of Sociology, but also in different Czech cities. And I have very nice memories of my discussions with these colleagues. I'm very grateful to them. And well, I wish every PhD student to enjoy the atmosphere I enjoyed when I was at CEFRES. Before Prague, I was in Berlin. Afterwards, I went to the College of Europe in Warsaw, where we were discussing almost day and night the enlargement perspective. And I remember some Polish colleagues doing their best to convince us that we should maybe pay more attention to two countries located between Russia and Poland, namely Ukraine and Belarus. And it was 20 years ago. And this is precisely something I find challenging and exciting when you are staying abroad for your research. You have your own research agenda, and you may overlook some issues that are very important in the long-term perspective. Once at CEFRES, we organized a conference on different aspects of territorial reform. By the way, I found out that the papers are still available on the website of CEFRES. I find it remarkable that they still are. And during this conference, we were talking a lot about political, administrative issues, how to support decentralization without undermining national unity. What about German minorities, border regions? I thought that these issues were the most important ones. However, when I look back at this experience, I wish we had dived deeper into the possible political consequences of long-lasting territorial disparities. Geography does not explain everything, and certainly not populism. But if you look at the electoral map of some Central European countries, and you see where so-called populist parties have their strongholds, you understand that disparities should not be seen as the side effect of the catching up process only. And it would have been great at that time to raise such issues together with Polish, Hungarian, and let's be crazy, British colleagues. And this is precisely my second point. For me, there is nothing more exciting than to bring together different European views. As you said, Clara, I am currently posted at the Centre Marc Bloch in Berlin, working on geography of energy. And I find it very important not to limit ourselves to Germany and France. In my field, as in many others, agriculture, regional policy, innovation, EU policies are very much shaping the landscape. And this provides great opportunities to work together, to discuss these policies, instead of working side by side with each colleague focused on its own country. I think it makes it easier to discuss our concepts, our methodology, but also the shortcomings, the benefits of EU policies, to investigate and to call into question their historical, ideological, and theoretical background. Moreover, these are fascinating issues. It's true that sometimes you need to be far away from Europe to understand how they are fascinating. As you said, Clara, I'm working from time to time with some colleagues at a university in Hong Kong, and I love going there for many reasons. But one of them is that I see more people impressed by EU achievements there than in Europe. And in this regard, I think we as academics, maybe we have a responsibility in shaping the public discussion on the European integration. The enlargement has been a success from the economic point of view, but I find some political decisions difficult to swallow. women's rights are under attack in some countries. Freedom of speech is being eroded. The European Court of Justice, which is the main pillar of the European project, is being ignored. So this is quite worrying, even if very few countries are affected. And we, academics, we have plenty of opportunities to travel, to spend some time abroad, to work together. And it seems to me quite important to make full use of such opportunities, not only to call for academic freedom, but also to engage in a dialogue over European integration, European identity, especially whenever the values we stand for are at risk. And I can see that CEFRES is playing a key role in this respect. So in a broad range of disciplines, I appreciate it very much. And frankly speaking, I find it more important than ever. So these are a few thoughts I wanted to share with you, and I'm looking forward to our discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gilles. I think you make a very important point, that question of social responsibility and also giving back what we're being given by such experiences that we can acquire in such places like the CEFRES, but also the question of internationalization as maybe becoming more consistent and resistant European entity. So thank you for that. Our next speaker is also a political scientist. So we have 2 geographers and 2 political scientists so far. Hanna Fortová, you're a researcher at the Institute of Philosophy of the Czech Academy of Sciences. And your research focuses on the key concepts of political philosophy, mainly in the works of French authors. I remember hearing you talking about such the 18th century philosophers at CEFRES when I was there. In 2016, you obtained a post-Celan fellowship at the Institut für die Wissenschaft von Menschen for the translations of the Principes de Politique by Benjamin Constant. And you also obtained fellowships at the Centre National du Livre. And that's when I heard you for the translation of L'Esprit des Lois by Montesquieu. And I think you also translated works, the political works of Jean-Jacques Rousseau into Czech. So Hanna, I'm giving you the floor for your initial presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Clara. And first of all, thank to Jérôme and all the team of CEFRES for organizing such a beautiful and important event in these difficult circumstances. And thank to Florence and Fedora for organizing this panel. I'm really pleased I can participate on this celebration of 30 years of CEFRES. And I'm really pleased to be a member of this panel. At the same time, I must confess I feel a bit awkward because I think my experience with internationalization of research is not as rich as for the other participants. Nevertheless, I would like to share with you my experiences in this field. I spent some time abroad, mainly in France, during my master studies and PhD studies. But after having finished my PhD, I decided to go back to my hometown where I still live. So I work at the Institute of Philosophy at the Czech Academy of Sciences. But I live in a small town, not even Prague. What I would like to share with you is my experience as a translator, because what is important for me as a researcher is the fact that apart from doing research in the field of political philosophy of 18th century France mainly, I also translate, as Clara said, the works of the French political philosophers. And during my PhD studies, the beginning of my translation career, if I may call it this way, was during my PhD studies when my former teacher, who at the same time was at the head of the publishing house Oikumene, which is one of the greatest publishing houses in the field of philosophical literature in the Czech Republic, he asked me to translate Montesquieu's Spirit of the Laws. And it took me quite some time, I think almost 10 years to accomplish these translations, but well, finally I did it, and I decided to pursue this career of translator. And I had a chance to translate the political works of Benjamin Constant and Jean-Jacques Rousseau, as Clara said. And for these translations, for all of these translations, I received fellowships, so I could go to France, thanks to Centre National du Livre, and to Vienna, to Institut für die Wissenschaften von Menschen, where I spent 4 months in a very stimulating and open institution, which I think is with CEFRES, one of the most important institutions for social sciences in Central Europe. And I would just like to stress the importance of this institution, both of Centre National du Livre and of this institute in Vienna, because for translator of these, let's say, classical canonical texts of French political philosophy, the work of a translator is a really solitary one, and at the same time to do well these translations, one has to stay in contact with the specialists in this field. And for me to be able to pursue my work as a researcher and as a translator, it is really essential to be able to stay in contact with the, well, let's say, professional environment of these specialists. And thanks to the French structures, as is the French fellowships by the French government and the fellowships by Centre National du Livre, I can do this. And I think this has nothing self-evident to support the translations of the works that were written 200 or 300 years ago, and to support the translations into East European languages, as is Czech language, with really a rather small community of people who are interested in these translations. So I would just like to stress the importance of these structures, as well as the importance of CEFRES, where I spent 1 year while finishing my PhD degree, and it really helped me to finish my thesis and to be able to obtain my PhD degree. And from this time on, I stay in contact with CEFRES, try to participate on activities, and I would like to stress here the importance of, for me, of library in CEFRES and of the work of Clara. Really, in the Czech Republic, I think this is a unique place where you can really stay in contact with the international field of research, not only on the 18th century, but, well, the 18th century is for me important, so I stress this importance. So once again, to finish, I would like to say that the work of a translator, and when you translate these old books, you are all the time alone, and at the same time to be able to participate on the international field. Without this organization as is CEFRES and the others, I couldn't do this. So I'm really grateful to it, and just want to say this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jana. And thank you everyone for actually keeping very strictly to the time. I think we can be proud of ourselves so far. And I think it was very important what you said, Jana, also because it shed a light, your experience is shedding a light on something that is very important for all of you and of us. That's the question of language, which is so important in the experience of internationalization. And yeah, so I'm sure we'll get back to these topics. And now I will give the floor to our fifth participant, Ludek Broz. Thinking of what Pascal Marty said before, you know, that he was engaging researchers to apply to international projects, I have to say that I was thinking of Ludek, whom I very much pressured a few years ago to enter the Tandem program. And actually, it was not such a bad idea, since Ludek who is a social anthropologist, he won an ERC entitled Veteranization of Europe, Hunting for the Wild Boar Futures in the Time of African Swine Fever. You are currently based at the Institute of Ethnology of the Czech Academy of Sciences, and you head the Department of Ecological Anthropology. You've conducted research in Siberia and Europe, focusing also on besides human and animal relations, on the question of suicide. So without further ado, the floor is yours.
I would say most of my childhood and teenage years that I would probably win Nobel Prize in chemistry or something like that. And I got admitted to the university, and then I did probably a big mistake because I traveled to Siberia just after my A-levels for the summer. And the experience was so, formatting, I would say, that after 3 years at the chemistry, I decided to drop my studies and move into anthropology and focus on issues that I, for the first time, faced in Siberia, where I really fell in love with the place and people. Now, in a way, this experience of mobility, even non-academic mobility, was then absolutely crucial. And I never thought of anthropology as some kind of local enterprise that not be international, right? So for me, that was by definition something that is international or transnational. And even if we speak about different traditions in anthropology, be it French tradition, British social anthropology, or American approach, and so on, for me, these are but different ways of how to approach international science or internationalization, right? So anthropology can be provincial, I believe. And but then when I started studying in the Czech Republic, I soon realized that I probably need more options, and I need to learn other ways of looking at different, studying different socio-cultural settings. And I think I realized that partly because of CEFRES, where I was very lucky to see many important scholars from France, and beyond, I would say, who came to Prague, gave lectures. I had firsthand contact with them, and it was very motivating for me. And here we talk about language limitations. I never learned French, I'm afraid. So I moved to the UK for my MPhil and PhD studies, and then I moved to Germany for my postdoc, then came back to Prague, and to CEFRES eventually, thanks to Clara, by the way, and her pressure, that wasn't a metaphor. And so it all somehow worked together and made perfect sense, and ended with the ERC project that we are just starting now, or started last year. But at the same time, I want to say it was never research without borders, as this panel, even though the question mark is titled, but very often it was research despite borders and across borders and about borders in a way, or one way or the other, right? And I would say that quite recently we had this big reminder how important it is to pay attention and do all that infrastructural work that was mentioned by Pascal, because when I started studying in the UK in 2002, the Czech Republic was still not part of the EU. And 2 years afterwards, we joined, right? And had you asked me back then whether I can foresee the EU, where the Czech Republic is a member, but United Kingdom is not, that would seem absolutely absurd, right? Since we had Brexit, and this was a big reminder and some kind of almost an end era of my life and of the world that I was born into, and that seemed to be losing borders along the way. Like as my life proceeded, I saw 1981. 1989. The break of the regime and all those possibilities. Then we joined NATO and EU, and it all seemed suddenly more free and flexible, academically as well. But I've seen very different trends. It's very difficult to work in Russia, whereas at the beginning of my career it was fairly easy. It's UK is not part of the EU, and suddenly we seem to be, well, we should stop probably taking for granted what's been achieved and kind of take better care of it, I would say. Yeah, that's enough for the time being. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ludek. You're right to stress the changing conditions of our world. Thank you for that. So now I'll give the floor for our last presentation by Aloise Adde. Aloise is representing medieval history here with us. You're working on the link between nation and individuation process in Brabant and Bohemia. And in a way, you're the mirror trajectory of Jana, if I may say so, because Jana left Slovakia and ended up in Paris, and you left France, and now you are currently in Luxembourg. You made several professional stays in Prague, but also Frankfurt, Berlin, and now you're currently working at Saint Louis University in Brussels as a Marie Curie Fellow. So Aloise, the floor is yours.
I would like to mention that I was a part of the organization of the 20th anniversary of the CEFRES, so it's a long way for me with CEFRES, and I'm very glad to be there today. So I left France in 2005 while I was starting my PhD thesis on Czech medieval history. I was studying at a French university, Paris 1 Panthéon-Sorbonne, and had no contact with the Czech academic world. I did not know the system of co-tutel joint direction at this time, which this system was not so widespread, at least in my discipline, medieval history, and between France and Czech Republic. So my career as an international researcher began in a somewhat unorganized way, I can say. My objective when I came to Prague was mainly to get access to the manuscripts of the Daily Mills Chronicle I was working on, to perform my Czech too, and to make contacts with Czech scientists. I was parallelly working full-time as a French and history teacher in a gymnasium, Jana a high school here in Prague. So the discovery of CEFRES through its library and Clara was decisive for me as an international researcher. After having hesitated, because at this time I thought that CEFRES were most oriented on politology, sociology, contemporary history. So I didn't think that I will fit the expectations of CEFRES. So I hesitated a long time. But however, in 2009, I obtained the Eiffel, at this time there was this fellowship, Eiffel Excellence Grant, and I was so a CEFRES fellow as PhD candidate for 1 year. And it was decisive for me for many reasons, because I could stop to work as a teacher and focus on my PhD. In addition, CEFRES gave me a place where I felt home, like Jana said, too. An office, it is very important, colleagues with whom I had discussions. And CEFRES was both a piece of France in Prague for me, and an interface with the Czech Republic. Thanks to CEFRES, I kept links with France. CEFRES organized regularly scientific events involving French scientists, with whom I could interact. And as a CEFRES fellow, I did not experiment with the common problem of PhD candidates studying abroad and losing contact. It was not my case. At the same time, I had a concrete affiliation in Czech Republic that allowed me to build easier new contacts, cooperation with Czech researchers and institutions. Thanks to CEFRES, I gained new contacts in France. I felt more integrated in Czech Republic, and I also had access to other international opportunities, for example, through the UMIFRE network. We spoke a lot about that. Because after my first day at CEFRES, I got a one-year fellowship in Frankfurt, in Germany, in a similar French center called EFHA, always in the frame of my PhD. So after I came back to CEFRES, then I began to work at the Humboldt University for 1 year, and then in Luxembourg. So I don't want to enumerate all my stays abroad, but I was counting in my head. I had 7 different experiences abroad in 5 institutions and in 4 countries. And we can say that CEFRES was the beginning of a long list of stays abroad. So internationalization played from the beginning an important role in my work, in my career. Thanks to it, I have developed a strong researcher profile by working on research projects, my own research projects funded. In addition, yes, I only worked on my own research projects thanks to the research funding agencies where I could applicate, like Luxembourgish National Fund, Marie Curie Action, etc. So I gained very soon a strong independence as a researcher, and I think that it's thanks to this internationalized pathway. In terms of content and knowledge, my international experience is also extremely rich and pivotal in my approach today. The permanent contact with Czech, German, Belgian, English, etc. researchers led me to take a step back from the French approach and to be more reflexive in the frame of my work. Many things became less evident. That pushed me to be more rigorous in elaborating my research object, my problematic, and my argumentation. Research is really enclosed within national borders. This applies to both work processes and content. The revision of a topic does not occur everywhere at the same time. I make this experience quite often. And so thanks to my international network and profile and experience, which involves mastering, we've talked about that, several languages, I feel that I am quite easily aware of new trends in research in my field, at least. So the other side, we didn't speak a lot about that, but of internationalization, at least in my situation, is precariousness. Because the more you evolve in the international world, the more difficult it is to get, I think, so it's my experience, a permanent position. Why? Because even if you have a dense network, people always consider that you consider you as being from somewhere else. They don't count so much with you. So it's my feeling. I also realized that through this experience that, as I told, conducting my own projects, I have become quite exigent. So it makes it also very difficult maybe to adapt, or I don't know. So maybe we could speak about that in the discussion. So I'm still hoping that I will find a permanent position, and I hope too that I will be able to keep this internationalized identity in my work further. So thank you very much for having invited me. And
thank you very much, Aloise, for your comments, because actually I would like to make 2 comments on what you just said. The first one is actually very nicely circling back to what Jana was saying, the question of reflexivity, because you're talking about reflexivity on your own research national methodologies, right? But there's also the reflexivity on where you come from. And it's true that the internationalization in research is also a human experience. And I think that's, you see where I'm getting at. An experience of widening one's world, probably opening up your visions, and it comes with its perks and its downsides. And I think we could start with discussing this. And indeed, you just started to talk about some of the downsides of such experience. So thank you very much for that transition, Aloise. So back to what we were just discussing with Aloise, Aloise's last remarks. You started to address, Aloise, the question of downsides and of this internationalization. You were saying that you became more demanding, and interestingly, that you were always taken as a stranger. Is being taken as a stranger such a bad position? Can't you be a familiar stranger, or a strange familiar? I don't know to what extent. But beyond the question of strangeness, of being a foreigner, are there other downsides to internationalization, according to all of you, and are there setbacks that come with the mobility experience and so forth? Who would like to start answering such questions? But let's say the more human aspect of this internationalization and maybe some of its downsides, because of course we love internationalization. We are all CEFRES products of sorts, but what are the difficulties there, if there are any?
For sure, well, having an international path doesn't guarantee the success. And we know that there is a huge diversity among institutions of higher education and research. Some of them are very keen to open their doors to people with a rich experience built with several steps in foreign universities. Meanwhile, others, follow a very different path and a very different logic, and we all know that about universities who are recruiting very locally, and so we perhaps all know people who had a rich experience abroad. I can remember of a colleague, a German geographer, who had been very successful in getting very prestigious grants in the US, in Europe. And when I met him in the Institute of Advanced Studies in Lyon, he was reflecting on his experience and saying that when he was looking at some of his colleagues back in Germany, some of them, had never tried to have any experience abroad and were, in a sense, protected by having always being faithful to their university, and they were sort of being granted positions after that. Meanwhile, sometimes the very demanding experience of applying, of changing environment was not very much rewarded. But I do think that if institutions of higher education want really to guarantee their future, they must recruit the most brilliant students, and they have to look at what the internationalization of careers and of research activities can provide. And I'm very happy to see, for instance, that Aloise, after all this experience, had finally found with the Marie Curie Fellowship a possibility of getting closer and closer to a permanent position, which is more or less what everybody in research wants to get or need. But I think that we will always find places where internationalization is not really taken as something interesting. But on the contrary, I think that the most ambitious institutions will and have the strategy of looking at the international students. And from what I know, for instance, here in Oxford, yes, there are a lot of people who are pure products of the English system, but many Oxford academics come from abroad, from France, from the US, from Germany, And there is a quite reasonable degree of openness, which is a hope for every young researcher who has an international research career.
Thank you very much, Pascal. I think it was very strong what you just said, because you also alluded to the problem of being stuck in one fellowship after the other and one grant after another. And sometimes it's very difficult to either find a permanent position or come back home. Ludek, I was wondering, you probably have some thoughts about this issue.
I think if you want to speak about the downside of internationalization, then probably we have to think more about what we mean by that. So on one hand, I see this word standing for personal mobility of researchers and institutions being able to accommodate them, attract them, but also stir some kind of movement. Perhaps institutions acting in a way that they not only ask for loyalty of people who work for them, but also for some degree of disloyalty or promiscuity, which is kind of an interesting concept for an institution that is self-centered, right? But we also mean by internationalization, I believe, that our conversations go across borders, across different intellectual traditions and so on. And they can, well, even now we are having this conversation, and we are not in one place, right? And as we write and publish in increasingly more and more international publishing venues, then of course these that go on. And I think these are very different aspects of internationalization, and they have their own downsides. So I don't want to take too much time here. We definitely can't explore all of them. But apart from what has been said already, I would say that a big danger of this growing trend, which I love myself, and that's why we are all here, is some kind of unification, right? It's almost like those globalization debates. Yes, it can be empowering and beautiful and stimulating and so on, but it can also sometimes have this effect of nivelism, of people trying to comply with the trend and just to succeed, right? Because success, after all, is important. We don't want to be caught up. Mobility is great if it's a choice, but it's not very great if it's something that you simply do to survive in your discipline, right? So, and trying to succeed means that you have to comply, and suddenly some else are becoming dominant of publishing, of even scientometry that sort of gives certain credit to some kind of publications and not to others and so on. And there is also the danger that some kind of internationalized CV will become the staple or required or needed profile of a researcher, rather than the active contribution of the thinking. And I know many colleagues who, oh no, okay, let me put it this way. I know I have brilliant colleagues who have been very mobile and very international all their life personally, and I have others who were sitting in one place and they are equally original and contributing to those big international debates. So I think what we need is some kind of flexibility and really to foster the diversity in the process, basically. Yeah, thank you.
I know you guys don't have access to chat, but if Jana or Aloise would like to jump back on what has just been said.
I would like to react now to what Ludek said about the homogenization, because I must say that I did not experiment that, because in my experience, so I had many, as I told, many stays, but at each time I was very integrated in the institution. So it was not, for instance, when I was at Humboldt University, it was very German. In Prague, so in CEFRES, okay, it was something between French and Czech. At Luxembourg University, it was very Luxembourgish, or somewhat German because the contacts are very close there. Now I'm in Belgium and it's very Belgian. So I don't think I don't agree with this homogenization. I didn't make this experiment, I must say. Because for me, research. So maybe it's also my experience as a medievalist. But what I constate is that research is very, very national, and it is sometimes very, very difficult to make people from many countries to work together. It's the problem in my discipline, in my field. So maybe we don't have the same problems. If you want to.
That's great. There's some debate. Jana, you want to add something to this?
Perhaps adding something to both what Aloise just said and to what Ludek alluded to. Indeed, I mean, there's probably a slightly different situation in mostly like political science and a very like Europeanized or Anglo-American political science compared to history, or especially some parts of history. And I mean, the downsides of internationalization understood as mostly mobility and career international mobility were mentioned here. One of the questions I'm kind of asking myself, or I keep asking myself, is related to the downsides of internationalization as the pressure to publish in international journals and international publishing houses. And that's kind of the question of what audience is one really speaking to in that case, considering the exponential rise of the number of publications, the exponential rise of the number of, not exponential perhaps, but the rise of the number of these journals, of the collections in different publishing houses, etc. What is the audience one really is speaking to in the end? And especially when one kind of recalls speaking to older colleagues that in many disciplines, especially in humanities and social sciences, there have been strong and interesting local debates also. I mean, one thing is universities closed to international recruitment, but then another thing is vibrant intellectual lives that happen in the national languages, in the very national reviews, in philosophy, in history, in sociology. And I'm kind of afraid, even for myself, that by playing the game of international publishing, I would kind of, well, first lose contact with the local debates, not even be aware of many that will go extinct with the retirement of the older generation of scholars. That's very exaggerated, okay? And then secondly, the question of what can be the link between these internationalized big debates and the local debates that can be intellectually interesting and happen in more restrained circles, referring to very precise theories and coherent conceptual frameworks. So kind of the big debates and smaller local debates link there.
Thank you, Jana. Actually, this dilemma or tension between the international and local was very much on our minds when we were doing this huge evaluation of Charles University that finished not so long ago. It's true that it's complicated because now, I'm not talking only about Charles University, major universities want to be evaluated and research centers want to be evaluated in terms of internationalization, but it's true that they also have social functions like Gilles was remembering us. Before I give you the floor, maybe Gilles, Hannah wanted to bounce back on what was just said.
I would just like to pursue the idea Jana was indicated about the audience we are addressing because for me, for example, in the field of political science and political philosophy, I feel a rather strong pressure on publishing in English in the recent years. But at the same time, I think it is important for us to publish in the Czech language as well, because, for example, for these translations I do, these are the works that, for example, have never been translated into Czech, which is, in one sense, it is hardly imaginable in France. But for example, the Montesquieu Spirit of the Laws was not translated entirely, the 2 volumes. My translation is the first one. And I think to develop the scientific, the research in the field of social sciences, one has to do the translations and then to interpret the texts as well as in Czech language. And I agree with a sort of a French translator, Brice Mathieu-Son, who says in French, tout texte est intraduisible, mais il faut quand même tout traduire. So nothing can be translated, but at the same time, everything must be translated, because yes, something is lost in the translation, but I think at the same time, it is vital for each linguistic community to have the translations in order to be able to develop itself.
Well, when I started to travel across Europe, I had in mind this famous quote of Lévi-Strauss, I hate traveling and explorers. I was a bit puzzled, but well, it's true that if you go beyond the first sentence of this famous book, you find out that, well, actually he loved traveling. But as far as I'm concerned, sorry to be a bit provocative, but I would say that the most difficult part of a stay abroad is when you come back. When I came back from Central Europe, I was extremely disappointed by some perceptions of Central Europe in France, but I'm not sure that it's very much different in some other Western European countries. And then you realize that it takes so much time to change perceptions, and you can dedicate a lot of time discussing with your friends or with your colleagues or with other people. And you realize that it has no impact, actually. I remember once precisely when I came back to Poland, I took part to a conference where there was a representative of a trade union. In front of the audience, I said that we should not talk about an unfair competition of Central Europe. That is far more complicated, and we should not say that because of the enlargement, we are losing a lot of jobs. And there was a guy from the trade union sitting beside me, and he didn't say anything. So at the end, I said to him, maybe you were upset to hear such things. And he told me, no, I fully agree with you. I know about it, but simply I cannot say it publicly. And then, so that's why I think that sometimes it's difficult to come back to your own country. Having said that, I would like to comment on what Aloise said. I find it great that many young researchers are traveling a lot, staying in one country and in another one. This is really fantastic. But I see so many young researchers, especially where I am now in Berlin, spending so much time on applying for a position of financing. Sometimes I have the impression that they spend half of their time doing that. I have no solution in mind, but I find it. I think it's a disgrace. What a waste of time, and what about the quality of your research if mobility goes along with financial insecurity? And if you have no financial independence, you don't have intellectual independence. So it's something which worries me a bit to see so many young people having no other choice than to apply for 6 months contract or 1 year contract. Really, I'm not sure that it's going to help European research.
Application, actually, I agree. Applications became a genre on its own. I mean, it takes as many weeks to write an application as writing a short synopsis for a film. Pascal, I'm sorry, but I have to ask you, what do you say about this? About this precarization a little bit of research?
I had two remarks. The first one of the homogenization of research through internationalization. I personally don't think that shifting to publishing in English language is a source automatically of homogenization. I do think that even journals in English language can offer a very important diversity. And we all do know that in social sciences, we have no epistemic unity. We live under very different epistemic regimes. And there is, I think, room for this diversity in the English language publications. And it's perhaps much better than sticking to its own language, which sometimes lead to sort of an epistemic chauvinism in a way. And to maybe I prefer the first solution than the second. Well, regarding the applications, well, I think that we have to support a simplification of the application process. And I can give you tell a short story, which was very striking to me. When I was a professor at the École Normale Supérieure de Lyon, we had applications for PhDs, financing, and the length of the application for the scientific school, physicist, chemist, biologist, was 6 pages. But for the social sciences and humanities, it was 12. And all our colleagues insisted very much of having a minimum 12 pages application instead of 6, because they argued that it was impossible to express the richness of your thought, of your thinking in less than 12 pages. And I honestly have to say that I can't understand that. I do think that we have to sort of, think about the length of the application, considering the importance of the application you submit. And I think that sometimes we ask too much for too small fundings. So we have to sort of proportionate the complexity of the application to what is expected in a way. And Gilles Lepesant was right in saying that, well, sometimes it's a waste of time of spending weeks and weeks on writing applications instead of writing papers, which is much more important. Well, if you can't sort of have a convergence between your application and the papers you are thinking about publishing later, then it's fine, but it's not always the case. And I am personally a strong advocate of simplification of the application process in general.
Now I would like to just draw back a tiny bit the debate. I wanted to ask you more about this question of the more human side to the experience. Did you ever feel that you could lose yourself by being constantly abroad, or did you feel that there was a danger? Did you feel, Gilles was talking about the same way Ludek and others, Jana as well. You were talking about the difficulty of coming back home, but what is the difficulty of always being away from home? Is it because do you feel that you are building new homes wherever you are going? Is there, what is the most difficult challenge, not as a researcher, but not only as a researcher, but I would say the person behind the researcher, or the person, within the researcher?
As I'm here back in Prague, it's a lot of feelings are coming back because I spent 10 years in Prague. So for me, it was it is still an important place in my life. And I was telling that as I'm feeling home, nowhere and everywhere. It's very strange. At least I can't say that I have a real home. But when, for instance, when I'm here in Prague, I feel home. When I'm in Paris, I feel home too, because I have a lot of friends, Clara too. And I spent also a lot of time in Paris. When I'm in Luxembourg, I feel home too. When I'm in Brussels, I feel home too. So it's a but sometimes it's very strange and it's confusing. Sometimes it's like I must say, a little bit depressed, but not depressed. It's maybe too strong, but yes, it's hard. I don't know. So sometimes it's difficult, but at least I like this feeling that when I'm coming back to Prague, it's very easy for me. I know so many people here. I'm not lost. I know where I have to go when I need, I don't know, something to buy, or I don't know. I feel very very confident and secure in these places where I had an experience. So it's a strange feeling, I must say. It's
well, I probably was way too lucky in the environments that I have been shifting from one place to another, because I kind of felt I could recreate a home in a way in every place. And God knows I've been kind of changing places since high school, and never actually lived again in Slovakia or my hometown, which then, I mean, for many disciplines, it probably does not represent an issue at all. In political science, it does slightly represent a very small issue of to what extent and in what ways do I care about where I come from, and to what extent do I get engaged in the different environments I integrate into, get engaged in terms of questioning research-wise these environments, but also engaged in terms of the workplaces, in terms, like in political terms, to what extent do I feel as becoming a citizen, even like an informal citizen of the places I get familiar with. And that's still an open question, and probably for many of the international paths, international research paths.
Thank you, Jana. I was wondering, listening to you, whether there is a disciplinary bias actually in our experiences of internationalization. Maybe we do not live internationalization in the same way, whether we are historian, political scientist, or literary historian. Pascal, you wanted to say something? Yes.
Yes, I want to get back to the previous subject. I want to pronounce a word. I have been now 1 hour without saying it. And this word is Brexit. And when you live in the UK, you realize, how wonderful is the EU in terms of mobility of persons. I have to say that now, if students in the UK for stays longer than 6 months, we have to apply for a very complex process of getting a visa. This visa will be charged a fair amount of money. So we are now in the UK out of this common, not only economic or human space, but also academic common space. And you realize when you are in this situation how precious it is to be able to circulate through the EU internal borders without any barriers, and this is a huge thing to live, and I think that what people experience during mobility within Europe and within the EU is the sort of feeling of common European citizenship, and I do hope that we won't lose that in the future.
Gilles or Ludek, would you like to react on this?
Well, yes, I find it very interesting what Pascal just said, and I do hope that it will be well known in some countries, in other parts of Europe, where some people are dreaming about going out of the EU or criticizing the EU for what is being done or not being done. I think we have a lot of lessons to draw out of Brexit. Well, coming back to your question, Clara, I think that in my case, or in the case of my generation, we could not complain. I mean, because we were in the position to travel shortly after the fall of the Iron Curtain, during the enlargement process. So it has been a fantastic period of time, extremely exciting. What we have seen in Germany during the reunification process, and then in Central Europe during the enlargement, was unbelievable, and it was extremely fascinating. And sometimes it comes back to my mind when I'm working on the energy transition in Germany, because they are using the same word, Wende, Energiewende in German, which refers to the energy transition. It was the same word used shortly before the reunification, after the fall of the Iron Curtain and the reunification. At that time, it was said that it is a kind of Wende. And again, we have quite exciting news almost every day. So I would argue that maybe this point of view is not shared by everyone, that our generation has been very lucky. And we should not complain. Moreover, I mean, I think that we all feel at home in Europe. So.
Thank you, Gilles. Hannah, I was thinking that, being a translator, and I think it was really important for us to have you as a translator, because it's really the question of finding the concepts in your own language and invent them, and it's a very important aspect of internationalization, But I was thinking that, so this European frame, and especially you who are working on political thinkers, who thought democracy, not only, but so how do you respond to what we were just discussing? So do you feel, I'll put it a little bit more naively, because I am a naive person, but do you feel that somehow this experience of internationalization that you use also as a practice, even if you're not moving, but you are in an international world as a translator, and how do you connect that to the question of Europe, for example, if that makes any sense?
Well, I think for everybody who is here, it was the Brexit was a severe blow, and I think perhaps thanks to Brexit, we more realized what it is to be European and how precious it is to be part of the European Union, and to be able, as Pascal said, to be able to enjoy the possibilities Europe offer us. And I think, for example, here in the Czech Republic, or in general, what we have to realize that it is not made for, I don't know how to say it. As for democracy, we have to do it every day. As for example, as Tuchel said, it is not that once it is settled, it is all done. And it is everyday work to be Europeans, to live in a democracy, and to live in a liberal regime. And I think what we witness today in Central Europe, in Eastern Europe, is a testimony to this. So I think to have some positive experience for Brexit is for us to realize how important it is for us to remain European and to remain united. So I don't know whether I responded. When you see the thinkers of the 18th century, so I think they laid the foundations of what we are today, or what our principles are today. So for me, this is also the reason why I think the 18th century philosophy is so important, because what we are today was thought for a large part in the 18th and 19th century. I don't know whether I answered your question.
You have. And I think that on that, I think that it's 7:05. We are 4 minutes late, which is very reasonable. Thank you so much, all 6 of you, for sharing your experience, answering these questions, and also I very much feel you entered in a dialogue with each other, and I think it's wonderful. I'm very happy that the Association des Anciens du CEFRES is now fully launched. And Florence, would you like to say something in the end? Or should I just conclude and say goodbye?
Well, I would like to thank you all for agreeing and participating in this like experimental roundtable, which is the first big project of the Association of CEFRES Alumni. So thank you very much for trusting us. And I think this has launched interesting conversations that should be prolonged in the future.
That's a very good idea. On this, I will give back the floor to Jérôme. Just wanted to say thank you. Thank you also for having me. Happy birthday to CEFRES. And well, I hope we have 30 more years ahead of us and with each other. Thank you.